Separation. Just the truth, baby. And it's not that I have any kind of a monopoly on it, but the idea is to pursue the truth, and that's not what everybody in this game is doing, unfortunately. Right. So tonight we're going to talk about Dr. Russell. I'm not going to play any clips from Dr. Russell's testimony. Most of us saw it, and it's probably you probably have enough trouble staying awake to my voice. But if you have to listen to Dr. Russell, it can be a little long. But we're going to go over some of my thoughts on this, and then we're also going to play some clips from some other dog bite experts and see what they have to say on it. So I'd like to start by saying that Dr. Russell was qualified. She's a pathologist. She's an emergency room doctor. She documented wound research for a number of years. She published work on dog bites. The problem is that no one can actually claim expertise, I don't think, on this particular case, on this kind of a situation, because dog attacks, generally, the victim survives and reports to the emergency room doctors what happened. And in the cases where they don't survive, they die to their wounds. And there's no question that the wounds are from a dog attack because they're very grievous wounds. In this case, or there's witnesses, right? But in this case here, there's no witnesses. You have very shallow abrasions, and all that people have to look at are the photos of it. So I don't think there's any other case like this. I don't think there's probably any other case that some expert can say that they testified in that was similar to this. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I haven't heard of any other case. And when you go and you look online for dog wounds, you're going to see that they come in a tremendous variety. So this is really the problem here, and I think we're getting to it. And I'm going to go over it here, and we'll get it also from the other dog experts that may not be fully articulating it, but what they're really saying when you boil it down is that nobody should be making definitive conclusions about shallow wounds on a corpse where there's no witness to what happened. Nobody. So the first question, well, first of all, when it comes to questioning Dr. Russell, again, I'm just an old bar owner, right? So I'm not a lawyer, so take it for what it's worth. But one thing that I would not ask was whether or not Dr. Russell used a methodology. I don't think that's going to be productive. What I would ask is this: did you use a methodology to come up with your conclusion? Now that's different. Because by now, 9 months after she first came forward, yeah, she has a methodology now. She's talking about defense fibers coming outside of the shirt and stuff like that. At least she has some explanation. She didn't have any of that stuff during the trial. And some of what she did come up with seems to have been with the help with defense attorney Robert Alessi. But most importantly, what methodology she now describes, she came up with after the trial. And to the main point, she came up with that methodology after making definitive conclusions on the wounds. And this is the problem. She looked at an article in the paper, which likely showed a single black and white photo of John's arm. And based on that, she concluded that these were dog bites. And she went right to the defense. Now, through the office of Alan Jackson. Or no, actually, I apologize, not through his actual office, but she went to the Los Angeles District Attorney, which is where Alan Jackson used to work. Now, she is a doctor in Los Angeles, but still, we have to question him. This is all kind of weird how this went down. Why didn't she reach out to Boston? Did she know from her research or from that article that Alan Jackson was representing Karen? Does she know anything about Alan Jackson, or that he used to work in that office, or is from LA? Maybe she did read those in the stories. Well, why not reach out directly to Jackson's office? Why not call the Norfolk County DA? Did she know that Jackson had worked as a prosecutor? I mean, I think all these things tend to matter a little bit. The origins of how she got involved does seem to be a little bit mysterious. But if the reason it matters is because once Dr. Russell reached out to the defense in the middle of a trial, mind you, she knew that they saw her as the knight in shining armor. She was the cavalry. She was coming to their rescue. Now, that defense of Karen, despite having over a year in a very high-profile case, which people usually flock to come forward in, they never found an expert to come forward on dog bites and say that those were dog bites. Now they had one, right? Right in the nick of time. Now Dr. Russell was there, and she's the hero. And she was welcomed onto that team. Now, she'd been retired for 19 years. And I'm very sympathetic. And we see this with a lot of other retired people that have inserted themselves into this case. For example, like Peter Murphy, the former Canton cop. And look, these guys, I sympathize. I see it around me too. My parents are still alive. It's a very hard thing when you get older and you look at, especially if you're someone like that doesn't have a hobby. Now, Dr. Russell seemed to have one hobby, and ironically, she was into true crime, which that could be relevant here too. But so here's a person who used to be an emergency room doctor. Now that's a high adrenaline environment where you're in demand. You're making quick decisions. You're a doctor. You're not just working in there. So you're vital to the operation of that place. You're one of the, if she didn't run the ER, she was still a doctor. I don't know. She may have ran it. I don't know. But she's very much near the top of the food chain in that everybody is depending on her. Life saving decisions, families grieving, or families desperate for hope. She's in the middle of that juice. In addition to that, because of her work documenting wounds, she was in demand on the lecture circuit for this wound documentation stuff. So this is a person who life was very full during that period, but she never got married and had kids. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm certainly not knocking that. I'm just saying that so her life was her work. And then when that's done, it's awful. You waste away, right? But so here she is after all this time, she sees a chance to step forward, and immediately she's embraced as the savior, not just for the defendant, but for a whole movement. So before she had any evidence beyond that Boston Globe article, she was already from day one the hero, the savior, as soon as she reached out. And she'd already formed her conclusions to a degree of medical certainty based on black and white photos in the Globe. I assume they're black and white. The defense now at this point is when the defense sent her the files that they had, the evidence to review before her testimony. But she'd already made her conclusions. She made them before she contacted the defense. That's why she contacted the defense. And that's the problem. Everything she did from that point forward, from the moment she contacted the defense, was to argue to that conclusion that she'd already made on incredibly limited evidence. Now, we might see the same thing with Rich Green, right? People have a tendency to dig in their heels on something. We might see it with the ARCA guys, right? This is a problem with human beings, but especially with someone like this here, who really, you can understand how she feels to be back in the juice, to have a meaningful life, to have purpose. But she should, as a scientist, as a doctor, understand how much that influence. She should have enough self-awareness to realize how much that influences her. I mean, was it even possible at that point for Dr. Russell, when she's getting this evidence from the defense team, was it even possible for her to change her mind? I don't think it was, right? I mean, she's the savior. So it's not about whether she had a methodology. It's about whether she had a methodology when she first made her conclusions, looking at a newspaper article. She talks now about the direction of the fibers on the rips on John's shirt, but she didn't mention any of that in the trial, any of it. Now, look, thousands of people looked at the photos of the wounds, photos which came with a caption that said something like dog bites. Now, thousands looked at the parallel wounds and imagined that maybe that could be teeth or nails. Dr. Russell did exactly the same thing, and that's all she did. Now, that's not scientific. That's not a methodology. To draw conclusions on that to a degree of medical certainty is not rational. Perhaps it's not even honest. I mean, maybe if she had said something like, look, those look like they could be wounds from a dog, right? Maybe that would be acceptable, because you look at something like that and you say, all right, maybe those could be dog wounds. I've seen dog wounds look similar to that. I need more information. That would be credible. But she actually went right to medical certainty. Now, she knows better than that. But she wanted to play the hero, be back in the juice, have that purpose in her life again. There is no expert that can make a definitive conclusion on shallow abrasions on a corpse from a photo. There are probably no cases ever before where an expert or a medical examiner has had to make such a determination. Shallow wounds that didn't even contribute to the cause of death. There's another example of that in this case. I tried to talk about it on Court TV the other night, and then the music came on, so I didn't really get to finish the point. And this is to a larger point about how much we are ignorant of a lot of things that and there's nothing wrong with that. 100% of us are ignorant about so many routine things that go on in life. And we certainly know nothing. Most of us know nothing about autopsies, medical exams, state police investigations, or, any of this stuff. And so we had heard from the defense back when they first put out their theory through Turtle Boy that something really suspicious happened in that autopsy room. What was it? The troopers She consulted the troopers on information. Aha! That's got to be something, right? That's got to be corruption. We imagine these guys going into the autopsy room and doing like really scientific medical things that we don't understand, but they do, almost like wizards, performing their arcane methods. And they come out with these exact conclusions based solely on looking at the body. That's how we see it, right? That's not reality. It can't be reality. And Dr. Scordi-Bello, the medical examiner, gave a really good example in the at the trial. So one of the conclusions was that a contributing cause of death to John was hypothermia. And she based that on hemorrhaging seen on the pancreas and the stomach. But she explained that science actually doesn't know why hypothermia causes that hemorrhaging, and that other things can also cause that hemorrhaging. So she doesn't look at hemorrhaging on the stomach and pancreas and write in her book hypothermia. No, she has to get other evidence from the circumstances of the death. Now that's common sense, but none of us, me, you, none of us thought about this back then, right? So how does she get that? That information comes from the investigators, the troopers. So the troopers would have said, all right, so Dr. Scordi-Bello, the victim was found. He was out for several hours in 18-degree weather with little clothing on. When he was found, he was unconscious, covered in snow, and his body temperature was about 81 degrees. So she looks at that information and combines that with what she's seeing in the autopsy, the hemorrhaging in the pancreas and stomach, and says, okay, hypothermia. Now, it should be the same thing with anybody trying to analyze the wounds on John's arm to try to make a determination. They have to look at the other evidence. Now, Hank Brennan, I believe, is going to focus on that part of it. It's not focusing on her overall methodology is a mistake, because she's come up with one by now. You got to focus on the methodology that she used, if she used one, to come up with that decision before she contacted the defense. Did she just and it's not necessarily wrong there, but just be honest. Like, I think the honest thing would be like, wow, I looked at these things, and I'm an ER doctor, and I've treated a lot of this stuff, and this to me looked like maybe dog bites. But if she says that she had already formed definitive conclusions, that really gives away that there's a problem with her credibility. But there's no question he's qualified. So I don't think that they should. I think it would be a mistake to focus on even trying to challenge that. She's qualified. And she's older, she's a little rusty, but she's an intelligent woman. She's a doctor. Okay. She's done a lot of a variety kinds of work. So there's going to be times when you can maybe unravel her a little bit. But if you go too hard, it's not going to, the jury might turn on you a little bit. And it should be focused on just a few simple things. We're trying to understand did she make up her mind based just on that Boston Globe article? And that's important. I'd also like to know, did she look up anything else? She has a 2001 article that we went over a couple months ago, shows that her only passion besides this medical stuff was true crime. That was her hobby. And that came out in the article. So did she follow any of what was going on Court TV and YouTube? So those are things that I think they're important to focus on. You can ask her, do you still have a hobby of true crime, Dr. Russell? Does anyone still ask her to lecture on those wounds like she used to? Does she miss being in demand? Does she miss the action of the emergency room? Focus on the methodology that she used to initially arrive at her conclusions, not her methodology since. Now, why didn't she talk about the direction of the threads during the voir dire or the trial? Did she neglect to look at the photos of the clothing before the trial? Did she not notice those threads back then? That's pretty important, right? Why is she noticing them now? Did she do any differential analysis before she reached out to the defense? What did she do? What did she tell the defense when she reached out to him? Again, why did she go through the LA District Attorney's Office? And given her interest in true crime, after reading the Globe article, did she check out any social media or court TV or YouTube? Uh, does she, it's fair to ask, does she believe in conspiracy theories? So in the 70s, she worked as a Medford cop. How was she treated? Was it like the old boys network? She was the first woman on the force there. Did she feel like it was an old boys network? Maybe those boys all stick together, because that could impact how she looks at this case, right? Now, I'd also ask her, does she understand what confirmation bias is? And of course, she's going to say yes, and then say, describe it for us in her own words. And I'd ask her, I'd like you to talk about something called top-down processing. And I would say, as a doctor, you're probably familiar with this, but let me give you a brief explanation in case your memory needs refreshing. Top-down processing is how our brains usually perceive things. We have prior knowledge, expectations, or suggestions, and these are what our brain unconsciously uses to determine what we're looking at. So when we look at an image, when we're told what an image is, an expectation is created in our brain. Again, all of this is unconscious, and the brain uses that expectation to help create the image that comes into our mind. For example, we've all seen the famous duck rabbit illusion. You've seen that drawing that, depending how you look at it, it's either a duck or a rabbit. So it can be an either or, and sometimes you only see one or the other. But if we're told what it is before we see it, then we're almost overwhelmingly always going to see it that way. So if we're told that it's a duck, we're going to see a duck. If we're told that it's a rabbit, we're going to see that it's a rabbit. That's how human perception works, and that's part of that top-down analysis thing. So I would explain this to the doctor, and I'd say, are you aware this is how the brain normally works? And isn't that a reason why you do differential analysis? So, because again, she looked at a photo in the Globe in which it was suggested to her that those were dog bites. So there's nothing wrong with her brain developing an image of that. But as a scientist, as a medical professional, she has to understand that we're all prone to that kind of bias. And so that's why you do something like differential analysis and do it rigorously to see what else it could be. And so I would ask her, what differential analysis did you do after seeing that Globe article when she first saw those images of the wounds? What steps did I would say, Dr. Russell, what steps did you take to make sure you weren't just seeing what the article suggested, or frankly, whatever else you might have seen suggested online in the true crime world, which she is a fan of? What are some of the steps I would ask her, what are some of the steps that an expert must take to make sure that they're not letting confirmation bias creep into their work? Have you ever been asked before to look at photos of a corpse and determine whether shallow wounds were made by a dog? Have you ever been asked to look at photos of any wounds on a corpse and draw some conclusion? I'm going to guess she never has. And I think that's important. That goes to not necessarily her qualifications, but again, this is an unusual case. These are very unusual wounds, a very unique kind of situation. So in that sense, she's qualified, but at the same time, this is not something she's ever been asked before, and maybe no one has, but certainly I would say she has not. Have you ever examined the inner structure of a taillight? So again, differential analysis is, what are the other things that could have caused these wounds? That's what you have to do. And she talked about it on the stand. Well, when you're considering that, did you ever look at the inner structure, zoom in on it, of a taillight? Because certainly she knows that the prosecution is saying that that John was struck by the car, that the taillight pieces were found all around John's body. So she should be saying, well, is there some way that taillight could have caused that? Like, for instance, if you look in that structure, do you see something that could have caused the parallel abrasions? Now, speaking of those, looking at the 3 wounds on John that show these parallel lines, has she ever made any attempt to determine why they look so different, why the space between them is each very different? So in your career, Dr. Russell, has there ever been an instance when you moderated your conclusions when more evidence came in? Have you ever adjusted, in any case, a pathology finding based on new evidence? For example, in this case, we have very shallow abrasions and no witnesses to the event. Wouldn't it be advisable to start out with a more moderate position like, well, those could be dog bites. I need more information. Was that your position when you first contacted the defense team? And if when you contacted the defense team, you were not sure to a degree of medical certainty that these were dog bites. So if you weren't sure when you contacted them to a degree of medical certainty, what was the evidence that put you over the top, that pushed you from possibility to certainty? What was it? There must have been something that pushed you over the top and said, yes, the only thing that could be is dog bites. Have you heard that there are other highly esteemed experts that say these are not dog bites, including two hired by the U.S. attorney? Did this make you moderate any of your conclusions? When you learned that the tests for canine DNA on the clothing came back negative, and that tiny pieces of taillight were found on John's clothing, and that the taillight pieces found at the scene were reassembled into an exact fit that matched the missing pieces on the Lexus, and that John's DNA was found on a taillight piece, and that a hair belonging to the victim was found on the back of the car. Did any of that cause you to moderate your position at all? Now, if we told you that evidence submitted in trial shows that the Lexus went in reverse at 24 miles per hour at the scene of the crime, just seconds before John's phone last moved, a phone found underneath him, does that moderate your certainty in this case? Now, if you one last question, Dr. Russell. Now, this question would probably be objected to, but it's the last question. If you changed your position from certainty to maybe, so that those could be from a dog, do you think the defense would still want you to testify? I object, Your Honor. I'm done with this witness. Or as my cousin Vinny said, I got no more use for this guy, or this girl in this case. All right, so let's go over. Again, those are just amateur thoughts, obviously, for us to enjoy or contribute if you like. So let me pull in the dog expert from Court TV. Now, this guy, he has a point, but it's a little bit difficult to get to because I think because of his age, maybe. Let's just be kind and say it that way. Where is this thing? Oh, here it is. All right. All right. So this is the episode that I was on with Nick the other night, but this dog expert came on before me and Nick and Joe Krowski came on. Let's see. I don't know. Let me refresh this. All right.
Boston area. But before the storm, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, Ben's girlfriend, college professor Karen Reed, at a local bar turned her into a bit of a than the original trial.
Skipping forward. So again, just we'll stop here since they're showing it here. So here are the dog wounds, and you see basically three there that show these parallel lines. They all look dramatically different. And Dr. Russell explained that this could be from bending skin or something like that, but these look dramatically different. The distance between the teeth or nails, and again, another thing, she's certain that this is from a dog attack, but yet she's not certain what wounds might be caused by teeth and what wounds might be caused by nails. This wasn't discussed, but to me, if you're mauled by a German Shepherd, it's going to look much more severe than this. You might get this from a German Shepherd playing with you, I guess. I don't know. But again, that's my amateur opinion. But let's get to the dog expert.
That's the question.
Simply an animal attack.
Well, they are consistent with a large dog attack.
And on what do you base the opinion that the injuries are consistent with dog bite or scratch marks?
Well, the patterns. There are several patterns of parallel wounds that appear to be superficial scratches that could have been caused by nails or could have been caused by teeth. I'm very very sure to that's the word I want. Medical certainty. Very high. So the high degree of medical certainty. Reasonable.
So a high degree of medical certainty. And all she has for evidence there is that you have shallow abrasions that happen to have a parallel structure to them. But there's any number of things in the world that could cause something like that. Right? There's no, it's not like if you looked at that and you found evidence like dog hair or saliva or canine DNA, things like that, then you'd say, okay, but just looking at that alone, that could be caused by all kinds of things. So I find it amazing that she goes to certainty, and I find it really is a problem, the main problem with her credibility.
Degree of medical certainty. Yes, definitely.
I think a high degree is higher than reasonable.
And I should say that, so that little clip there was not from the recent Daubert hearing. That was from the trial. And I think actually that was from the voir dire right before the trial.
So that was the expert that we saw in the trial. So the prosecution didn't have their own expert to talk about. They had someone who said, no, this is from the tail. So we're going to bring in a dog bite expert. They were talking about in court.
And Vinny's absolutely right. I mean, the prosecution, the only independent experts we brought in were were Jessica Hyde and Ian Whiffen, and this is in regards to the data primarily on Jen McCabe's phone. But they brought in no experts in the field of accident reconstruction, no independent experts in the field of dog bites. They chose not to. My understanding at the time was that they had an expert for the dog bites and they didn't want to pay for it. So they're paying a lot more now.
Tonight, we're going to talk about tonight. Joining us, an expert. He's a PhD in animal behavior, has studied it for 40 years. He's been retained in hundreds of court cases on this issue.
Dr. Richard Polsky. Dr. Polsky, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Great to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Let me start with a general question, then I'll get more specific. Can you look at a photo of injuries and determine whether or not they're the result of a dog bite, dog scratch, dog attack?
Well, in my experience, you have to look at the totality of the evidence, which is more than just a photograph of the dog bite or the type of injury on the person's arm, like in this case, the victim's right arm. You have to ask certain questions about the behavior of the dog, as well as the context in which the incident happened. You look at the individual dog, you look at its temperament, and you ask, well, this dog with its behavioral history, would he bite a person in the context in which the...
No, I just want to stop there. I'm going to guess that is not bruising on the upper shoulder, but probably lividity. But, I don't know.
The incident supposedly happened. In order to do that, ideally, you should do, or if it's able, you do a behavioral inspection. There's a certain protocol for behavioral inspections to see if the dog had the temperament to inflict a bite injury. And in that regard, you also want to look at how well the dog knew the victim. Was this a stranger? Was this someone who
Complete
came
stranger.
to the house and regularly interacted?
Now, here, I'll give you the background of what the defense is alleging here, that there's some sort of altercation in the home, right, between perhaps the homeowner and the victim here, and they believe at some point the dog jumped in. That's kind of what they're intimating in their theory of the case. The dog does have a history of one other bite, and that bite involved, I think there were two dogs going at it, and someone was trying to break it up between the two dogs, and the dog bit the other dog owner. I believe that's the backstory on that. So I'll give you a little more background there. Does that give you a little more to think about? And what do you think about that photograph?
Well, you certainly have to consider the nature of the wounds, whether they appear to be caused by a dog or some other animal. Injuries like this can be caused by similar type of inflictions. For example, there's lacerations caused by a sharp object. There's human bites. Cats can inflict bites like this. Rodents, coyotes, and the nails, for example. So the photographs in themselves cannot be used to come to any definitive conclusion. As I said, from my perspective, you have to look at the totality of the evidence. And the totality of the evidence, you have to look at the context. You have to look at the motivation of the dog. You have to look at the temperament of a dog. Would the dog be motivated to attack a person in this context in which it allegedly occurred? So there's certain animal behavior questions. And in that regard, part of the method, if it's possible, is to do a temperament test of the dog.
Gotcha.
And that can be done.
Let me do.
Yeah,
I don't want to run out of time here, Doctor.
So
Let me. I want to play something else for you that came up in court today.
So I don't think that that's useful. Testing the behavior of the dog or whether it knew the John and how it interacted. I don't know. To me, I think the part of there that's important is that there's a lot of things that could cause these injuries, these wounds, and there's nothing really definitive about them. And to be able, I do agree with him that you have to get the totality of the evidence, as much of the evidence as you can. And but I don't know. I don't think this is a great expert. So now he's testified in hundreds of cases, but what is he's testified in hundreds of dog bite cases. But what kind of cases, right? Does any one of those cases involve him looking at a wound on a corpse and trying to identify if that wound belonged to a dog, was caused by a dog? I'm going to guess no. And this is why, and this is apparent too when he's talking about so much about behavior. He's testified in cases, I'm just guessing, that probably have to do with liability, what caused the dog to do this, those kind of things. I don't think probably any of those cases involve the question of whether there was a dog attack. So to me, just the fact that he's testified in hundreds of dog bite cases probably has no bearing. I would say Dr. Russell's probably more qualified than him, but the issue is that Dr. Russell really didn't use good methodology. She didn't use a methodology, as far as we can tell, until after she had arrived at the conclusion.
Today, and I think a lot of folks have questions about it. Let's take a listen to the dog bite expert. She's a doctor, Dr. Marie Russell.
Did you ever discuss going to see Chloe and doing these studies on Chloe so you could see if they were dissimilar to these abrasions?
I was asked to evaluate the wounds.
Do you know that Chloe exists, that we provided notice to you, that we went up and saw Chloe and took molds? Did you know that?
Objection, Your Honor. Did you know that? I'm going to allow it. Did you know that, Doctor?
I do know that now.
Now that you know that Chloe's available, wouldn't those molds be helpful? Wouldn't you want to look at them and compare them to the distances on the abrasions on Mr. O'Keefe's arm?
Objection, Your Honor. I'm going to allow it.
I don't think it's necessary for many reasons.
Okay, doctor, what are your thoughts about taking a look at the dog molds? Is that something that would be done normally?
Certainly, yes. If it's possible, the dog's still alive, you certainly, absolutely want to take teeth impressions and to determine if the teeth are consistent with the wounds on the victim. For this expert says it's not necessary. It leaves me confused. You have to look at as much evidence as possible to come to any definitive conclusions. And after you look at including DNA evidence, sometimes in these cases, clothings are stripped and there's bites from head to toe. And based on the totality of all the evidence I briefly mentioned, you can come to certain conclusions with a reasonable degree of certainty. Yes, it was a dog bite. Some of the wounds were a dog bite, other wounds were not, or none of the injuries were caused by a dog bite, or one can't draw conclusions based on the evidence. But it's very important, in my opinion, to look more of the evidence whenever it's possible than just looking at the wounds from a photograph.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me.
Let me play you one more
That's my
thing.
opinion.
Yep. No,
Okay.
it's very clear. I mean, very, very clear what you're saying with your background. Let's take a listen to the doctor one more time here, talking about her experience, and because they're using her as an expert, and that's the issue in court.
Not very many medical examiners have the experience first of all, have experience with dog bites, seeing hundreds and thousands of dog bites and treating them. And not very many medical examiners have even autopsied a case of dog bites. So although, some physicians have certain opinions based on what they know, they don't have my experience. I'm
Do
sorry.
you know if Mr. Walsh had your experience or not?
I don't know who
The
is it?
gentleman who gave this opinion that was employed by the federal government, do you know if he had your experience or
What's
not?
his name?
Mr. Walsh, John
No.
Walsh.
No, I don't.
So he could have more experience for all you know.
Oh, I'm highly unlikely.
Okay, you have more experience than anybody in the country.
I think I have at least as much experience as any other possible person in the country. And I have it from both aspects, from the clinical aspect and from the forensic aspect.
Okay, Dr. Polsky, her background, 30 years. She says, I believe it's about 500 dog bite cases that she's treated and observed. For her versus a medical examiner, whose opinion do you think would be better? And number two, how many experts are there like you out there who do this type of work, and what are their backgrounds?
Well, there's various kinds of so-called dog bite experts. I don't believe I've ever come across an emergency room physician who qualified as an expert. There's dog trainers, there's veterinarians, there's animal behaviorists, for example, veterinary behaviorists. And the problem with a person like this expert, in my opinion, is she's trained to fix the injury, suture the injury. Sure, she may have seen the characteristics of many of these alleged dog bite injuries, but as I said, they can be caused by other means. And I don't know if she went into that depth of investigation. And a dog bite injury is caused by the behavior of the dog. So you have to do an animal behavior analysis. And as I said, you have to look at the context, the motivation of the dog, the relationship. And I don't understand. I'm not clear if she did any of this. And if she didn't do any of this, then it doesn't meet the standard needed to come to definitive or reasonable conclusions.
Dr. Polsky,
yes.
We're out of time for tonight.
All right, so we'll come back with a little bit on this and show some of the discussion with Nick and Joe Krowski, the brilliant Joe Krowski. I think the important thing here, Dr. Russell says that she's done 500 cases involving dog bites. How many of those cases involve Dr. Russell having to determine if the victim was attacked by a dog? Are there any? Has she, as a pathologist doing autopsies, did she ever once had to look at a victim, not knowing what, because there's no witnesses, so not knowing what happened to that victim, and had to determine if a wound was a dog bite? Has she ever had to do that? Has this guy ever had to do that? Has anybody ever had to do that? I think that's the problem here. So I'm not sure either of these people are fully qualified for this, but I don't know if anybody is. It's got to be incredibly rare for someone to be looking at wounds on a corpse and trying to determine what it was. And especially where the cause of death in John's case had nothing to do with those wounds. So I would ask those kind of questions to Dr. Russell when she gets out there and says, yes, I've worked as a pathologist. Check. Great. You've worked in the ER as a doctor treating wounds. Great. You've done extensive documentary research documenting wounds. Great. You've published peer-reviewed research on police dogs. Outstanding. But have you ever been asked to look at a corpse with a shallow abrasion and determine whether the wound was caused by a dog or by something else? So if not, and I'm very confident that she's never had to do that before, then this is a unique situation for her. And automatically, because of that, she should have approached this with much more caution and not jump to conclusions. And that's the one thing with this Polsky guy is right. It's very, very strange to have someone like this just jump to conclusions. But we see this in high-profile cases because people want to get involved or there's a payday. There was an expert that was brought in. No doubt he was qualified as in terms of former police detective in the O.J. Simpson case that was paid, I forget, I don't remember, but it was like $40,000 to come in. He looked at like 6 photos of the crime scene and then got on the stand and testified that it was the sloppiest crime scene he'd ever seen based on that. He just completely sold out. He did it for the money. But there's all kinds of different motivations here. I really am not accusing or even suspecting that Dr. Russell was motivated by money. But in her case, it's hard to resist the idea to something to pull you back in, to where you have purpose again. And there's so much evidence here that she did not look very deeply at the evidence. I mean, at the time of the trial, she had been given the canine DNA and shown that no canine DNA was found on the clothing. And she didn't even open that file. She didn't even seem aware of it during the voir dire. So she had made up her mind, and everything that's happened since that is just to try to find a way to argue to the conclusion that she made on day one when she looked at that article. And in that article in the Boston Globe, I guarantee there is no reasonable way you could determine with anything close to certainty or even probability that those were dog bites. So I think that's the problem with Dr. Russell. And this is going to be the problem with the ARCA guys too, and with Rich Green. So Rich Green, Lally seemed to be suggesting that Celebrite Ian Whiffin's office had tried to reach out to him, and we won't know unless they ask Ian Whiffin, but that he wasn't interested. And, is he willing to adjust his conclusions now that he knows and that much better experts have explained what happened there? Or is he going to be embarrassed and say, no, I'm going to dig in my heels? Because it's human nature to do that, right? But what is he going to do when he learns, and he already knows, that the company itself, whose software he used to find that 227 search, has changed their softwares because of it? And, well, we'll get to this when we go to Nick after, but so many false things get said about this stuff. And the same thing with the ARCA guys. There's no question the ARCA guys are qualified, but they had no interest in the tech stream data, the vehicle data that showed what speed she was going, the fact that she was going in reverse. They had no interest in any of that stuff. And they didn't consider what we're now learning from the prosecution this week, which we have always thought here, or I shouldn't say always, I should say long thought, that John had reacted at the last second, putting his arm up in a defensive position. So Karen is pulling, he's walking in the general direction of the driveway, and maybe he stopped if he dropped his phone to pick it up. We don't know. She puts it in reverse and drives for a few seconds and then puts it in reverse suddenly and comes back, and 3, 4, I think it was 7 seconds after she put it in reverse, a long time, was when she struck him. So at some point he's walking and he probably hears her coming towards him and just kind of automatically goes like this, and his elbow breaks the taillight. That's what the state seems to be saying. But the ARCA guys didn't even consider that stuff. So so it's not that Dr. Russell isn't qualified. It's that she's not really trying to get to the truth. She's not self-aware enough to address things like confirmation bias. And that top-down reasoning where our brain automatically hears a suggestion and then matches it to an image and it fits it into a pattern. But all she's really looking at are parallel lines. And there's many things that could cause parallel lines. There's probably several dozen things in your house that you could find that could easily make a shallow wound with parallel lines. So, yeah, it doesn't seem like her testimony was credible. And seeing the same thing with the ARCA guys, they weren't looking for the truth. And this is what happens in a lot of cases. And it can happen on the other side too with the prosecution. I'm not saying in this case, but in any case where an expert has kind of an incentive to help the cause, right? So, for example, the officer in Dighton, it's very possible that he put in his testimony that there was a missing piece or missing pieces from the taillight. Maybe he never saw that. I mean, it was stuffed with snow, open taillight after feet of snow falling. Maybe he never really looked at it that closely, In his report, he just said damaged taillight is all he said. He had no reason to be specific about it. But it wouldn't shock me if he never really looked at it and just kind of added the missing pieces. And I'm not accusing him of that. I'm not at all accusing him of that. I mean, I give him the benefit of the doubt. But that evidence isn't really important to me because I know that testimony can be influenced. It's just human nature. So let's go to.
But this case is continuing, and we will. What are your thoughts here about what Krowski Jr. and the YouTuber behind Yellow Cottage Tales, Kevin Lenahan? Great to have everyone here. All right. Let me start with you, Nick. What are your thoughts here about?
Was anybody surprised that he started with Nick? I'm just teasing him. But I mean, actually, he always starts with Nick. But in this situation, it makes sense, I guess, because me and Joe are kind of on one side and Nick's on the other. So it probably makes sense to give Nick a little more time. Although he still does it when I'm on with, instead of Joe, they have on Peter, I can't remember his last name, who is on Nick's side. And it kind of still goes the same way. They go to Nick first. Nick gets more time, but that's all right.
What's happening in court now and about this evidence of this dog attack?
Well, I think one of the most important things about the impressions of the teeth from Chloe is that this incident happened almost 3 years ago this month. So 3 years is a long time. Things can happen. Teeth can move. Teeth can fall out. So getting the impressions, is it important? Yes.
That's kind of weak, Nick. Teeth can move. Come on, man.
But is it going to be, as far as being used in court, there's no direct bite on John's arm that's going to have a full teeth imprint on there. That when John was being attacked by the dog, I'm sure John was moving, just like Marie Russell said. He wasn't just laying there when Chloe was attacking. He was probably moving, so the dog didn't get a firm bite on his arm. And I think today, Hank Brennan was trying to prove that she wasn't an expert and that she provided basically no methodology to her claims. But in the Demunic and Pollock, the articles there, the whole reason for those articles was to point out the fact that pattern recognition is acceptable to rule in dog bites. And then you also have the case of Robert Alessi, where.
See, I couldn't find this case. Robert Alessi is the, if anybody has this out there, get me this case, please. I looked and I couldn't find it. So Nick is suggesting here that Robert Alessi is the attorney that was here that did the direct examination of Dr. Russell. And Robert Alessi, I don't know, Nick is suggesting that he was involved with a dog bite case. If anybody knows of that case, please get it to me.
I believe it was in New York, a Dauber hearing as well, where if a doctor sees and treats dog wounds and injuries, they're reliable to be an expert inside of a courtroom. So, this is the defense expert. If they have Chloe, if Hank Brennan is very strong in this case, there should be no reason to exclude her because they should have an expert that's going to be able to debunk everything, that she says.
Yeah.
And one thing that I did.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. The other thing I was going to bring up was, today was mentioned, we heard more federal investigation, that this doctor is an Emmy. And
now I want to talk about this part here too for a second. You guys know I've been on Court TV, argued against Nick, I don't know, 50 plus times, right? This part, I think he's effective at what at learning what he has to say and countering other points raised by me or Joe. I think he's a relatively effective arguer. However, I have had time, you pick up certain strategies that or argument styles that your opponent uses, right? And what he's doing now, there's no way in hell that Nick came up with this on his own. All right. So the big news that came out of that hearing that none of us had ever heard before was that the U.S. Attorney's Office, the feds, hired 2 independent bite experts that both concluded that John was not attacked by a dog. And that was the big news to come out. And what Nick tried here is it's kind of a lawyerly trick, right? He knows that that's something that me and Joe are probably going to bring up. And as it turned out, it was Vinny that brought it up. But so he tries to get out ahead of it, which is a good strategy because then you could put your spin on it. We saw this in the trial when the prosecution, knowing that they had very damaging personal texts from Michael Proctor, instead of letting the defense bring him out, they brought him out. Same thing with Brian Higgins. They brought him out on the stand. The prosecution has a little bit more control over it, right? And that's a good strategy. But so Nick is doing that here. There is no way in hell Nick thought of this on his own. There is no way. So Nick, who arrived in court and left in the limo, Karen shows up in court in a limousine like she's a Hollywood celebrity. And so today, and not today, but on this day, coming with her, in addition to her attorneys, was Nick. And presumably Nick left with them in that limo. I don't know if they got drinks in the limo. I imagine they do. But in that limo, so we hear from Court TV about 1:30. So by then he knew he was on Court TV with us. And he's talking to Karen and her lawyers, and they're preparing him for how to handle going on Court TV. Because you would say, like, why would the lawyers care about that? Listen, everything that these lawyers have done for a year and a half is a public relations campaign. That is front and center to their whole strategy, is to try to manipulate the public. So they want to help Nick when he goes on Court TV. And so I guarantee that they came up with this little strategy for him.
And came to the conclusion that this was not consistent with an animal bite. But I'm sure what Plevin is going to do is tell you that, hey, you got to believe the feds now, but don't believe everything else they said. So it's going to be a double-edged sword no matter which way this case goes. And we know we've seen it from the first trial.
Yeah. How about just having a battle of the experts, Joseph?
So this is absolutely, I have an answer to it, but again, you're always limited in time here, and then, the way it works in these shows, Vinny's going to have a different question for me too, and then as it turns out, you'll see my answer. Well, I'm not going to play it here, but the music started on me, so I got less time. So, but what I would say to Nick is this, and I wanted to say it. Actually, Nick closed going back to the FBI thing on his lap, but he went last, and so he has the advantage of going first and last. But that's all right. We'll give him that advantage. He needs a little help, and so he's trying to suggest that the FBI found that 227, that search was true. And that he's trying to equate that here. And he's trying to say, well, you can't accept one and not the other. But there are some pretty big differences. Now, we don't know, right? We don't know. All we know on what the FBI did with the 227 search is the very, very one sentence that David Yannetti said in the pretrial hearings. And I don't have it in front of me, but I believe what he said was the FBI confirmed the 227 search. But what does that mean? All right, we don't know, right? We have to speculate. But we have a long history of how David Yannetti and Alan Jackson have conducted themselves in this trial. They talked about a gap in the library video. There is no gap. The camera is motion triggered. So in this gap, when Karen supposedly went by it going home, all that shows is she actually didn't go that route. And that's all we know. But they tried to make it seem like there was a gap. There's no gap in the library video. They're allowed to do this. They're allowed to make these assertions and twistings. In September of 2023, we learned. They sent the hair for testing, and they only gave the defense a small piece because this testing is destructive. It went to an independent lab, and the independent lab was not reported that it didn't find human DNA. Now, what that meant is it just didn't find enough DNA, didn't find any DNA or enough DNA to make a determination. But what Alan Jackson got up on the stand at the hearing and playing for the cameras said, it turned out that hair was non-human DNA. And of course, they'd already leaked this to Turtle Boy a couple of days before, and he was lying to his audience or being disbelieving and non-skeptical as he is and easily duped. He was saying it's non-human hair. In other words, like it's artificial hair. And I said right away, I don't know how you people fall for this stuff. I mean, you can tell it's not saying that it's nowhere in that report does it say this is a non-human hair. That's just the way they like to spin things. So now we all know now that hair not only was human, it was matched to John. And not even the defense really argues that. They try to argue that maybe it was planted there now, but they don't argue the validity of the testing. So, but these are stunts that they do all the time. So is this what Yannetti did when he said the FBI confirmed the 227 search? What does that even mean? But let's compare that to what Hank Brennan did. He gave us the names of two independent doctors who we can now look at them and look at their resume. And he quoted at length, and we're going to show this here coming up. He quoted at length from their reports and what they said. Yannetti did not do that when he made that claim about the FBI. So my guess is that the defense team turned over the extraction from Jen McCabe's phone to the FBI, and the FBI simply ran that extraction through the same version of Celebrite that Rich Green used. Well, not surprisingly, it's going to find the same result. But we may learn that the FBI did a full analysis and said 227 did not happen at that time. Or they may have even said it can't be determined. We don't know what they did. But Yannetti's going to seize on that one little thing that says confirmed. Because let's face it, they're liars. I mean, when you're putting out something like you did to Allie McCabe and try to suggest that you're distorting the data in order to make it seem like she's doing all these kind of trips all around town, shuffling someone who they accuse of murder into all kinds of nefarious things. But when all that was going on was she went home and her phone was reaching out for a Wi-Fi signal or reaching out to a cell tower. He knew he was distorting that, but he didn't care. And here's a guy who has a couple of daughters of his own. And he didn't care. And I am in a documentary that I don't usually talk about. But, without getting into specifics, they were shocked by David Yannetti's behavior. They were shocked. Let's just say that. That's probably the only thing I've said on that in many, many months. So that's it. All right, let's get to Joe. And then right after that, they'll play the federal stuff.
Well, a panel of the experts is fine if you have two experts. Dr. Russell is not an expert in diagnosing the cause of an injury. Just because and I'm not discounting the fact that she is an experienced ER doctor and was a forensic medical examiner at one point, but she has never in the lifespan of her career taken an injury whose cause was unknown and followed an accepted, recognized methodology and come up with an opinion on the cause of that injury. Her experience is all empirical.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's Joe just said much more concisely what I said in my opening. There's no instance of her doing this kind of work where she's taken an injury like that and scientifically had to make a determination.
People have come into the ER, they've reported that they've been bit by a dog, and she's given whatever necessary triage or treatment. And you saw it today when she was pressed, she just kept coming up with the conclusory term, pattern recognition. What is your methodology? Do you take a picture? Do you then take a known exemplar? Do you then look for measurements? Do you then get it peer reviewed? She couldn't answer a simple question, and it's no disrespect to her. It's because she has no experience in forensic dog bite pathology at all. So,
and I would say it's not just because she has no experience. I would say that she has no experience. Well, she also has no experience testifying, or she has no experience trying to determine what a wound like that is on a cadaver. So she didn't really know where to start. If it happens again, she might know where to start, but she hadn't done this before. And she lacked the self-awareness or the integrity to wait to find all of the other evidence. I don't mean all the other evidence, but the relative evidence, at least what evidence could be had, such as about the crime scene, to make that determination.
what Attorney Brennan is saying is that just because you have some sort of professional expertise, you just can't get up there and opine whatever comes off the top of your head. And there was a lot of critical points, but I don't want to take up the whole show, but I hope we have time to get into them.
Joe, that's hard for Joe. Joe's got like a lot to say. It's unfair to do a show with Joe and have to limit him to like a minute and 20 seconds. You really need to do like a Joe Rogan type podcast with Joe where he gets to, because I can't think of I really can't think of anybody in terms of a lawyer that I'd rather listen to than Joe.
Well, we never have enough time to get into everything. In this case, there's so much. I want to show everyone this, Kevin, and I want to get your reaction. This is when it comes out in court that the feds came to their conclusion about the cuts based upon what their medical examiner they consulted with had to say.
Did you know that the U.S. Attorney's Office employed a deputy medical examiner to look at these bites? And then he had commented that the wounds are 2 to 3 millimeters up to 7 centimeters were documented.
Karen does not look happy. I remember this when this happened. She looked shaken and miserable for a while after this. Obviously, she knows about this report, but
on Mr. O'Keefe's right arm, and the injuries do not photographically appear to be, nor are described as puncture bite wounds, and thus are highly unlikely to be the result of an animal bite attack. Did you get that expert opinion from the United States Attorney's Office when they investigated this case to consider as part of peer review?
Objection, Your Honor.
Okay, here's what I'm trying to figure out, Kevin. The injuries came from something, right? So,
all right, we'll probably skip this because I'm sure I'm just going to say something that you've already seen me kind of talk about. So does Krause have a YouTube? No, I talked to him. He was thinking about maybe at some point starting his own YouTube, but no time soon. He's too busy. But that would be a great channel. You know, why does Nick? I mean, I'm not going to make a big deal about it. It's just he was somebody pretending to be Dr. Marie Russell said, "I'm getting a limousine for the trial. Unetti promised me." Well, you deserve it at your age, doctor. All right, let's get some comments up. Heisenberg said, when you said she didn't have to see the dog in order to form an opinion, major red flags against her. When she said, I'm sorry. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, Heisenberg. Thank you. James Clay, bingo. Nick Rocco is a Latro Ricket. I don't know what he's saying there, but thank you, James. Just saying what Karen Reed tells him. And Psych Nurse, thank you very much for the contribution. Appreciate it. Get back to the comments. So there's something else I want to show. There's a couple of things that I want to show you guys. Oh, Joe is here. Good. Thank you, Joe, because Tom is on vacation. He may pop in from vacation. He's been known to do that, but we shall see. All right. I want to show you guys a message between Karen and Vicky Ventro. And this, I don't know. I'm not going to say that this presents witness intimidation, but it's interesting. Let me pull this up for you. All right. So Victoria Vento, I haven't seen her act. But she was always extremely active in the Facebook groups, the Free Karen Reed Facebook groups. And she was basically going to the address of Brian Higgins' house. I'm not going to, he lives in the Cape. She says, I drove by, his truck was in the driveway. Karen says, any other cars? Wow, you are brave. And gonna go by again tomorrow morning. And Karen says her sister lives in Sandwich. So I'm told this is Karen. Anyways, this is from an insider. This is from an insider. Like I said, many people are flipping on the inside because of their own conscience and their own questioning things over time and seeing a lot of shady behavior by Karen and by Turtle Boy. And so they flip. As it's not one or two. And it's a tide that eventually is going to swell up and become a flood because the evidence is just getting stronger and stronger. So really what we need to do, though, is there are many, 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 many thousands of good, decent, intelligent people of the world. They live in this state. The people, that had careers, have families, that have only heard kind of superficial evidence of this case, and they believe in the conspiracy. So we're working on that. See, the one that's pretending to be Dr. Marie Russell says it's past her bedtime, but you may have forgotten she lives in California, so it's only 6 o'clock out there. Let's see if I have anything else for you guys. So Nick puts out what he's told, and he was putting out a report, apparently, that Julie Nagel was called before the federal jury for a second appearance. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Just looking through all the stuff that people send me. I get some stuff will mass up over a few days and I forget what might be interesting for other people. I guess the other news to talk about is Turtle Boy's lawsuits. I mean, it's just the idea of that guy suing anybody for defamation. Don't get me wrong. I'm not in any way excusing any defamation if it took place. I don't know if it did or didn't. I can only say that for myself, I have never made those particular accusations or that one about the R word against him, because it's a very serious accusation and he's not charged with it. And I'm not aware of any evidence that I personally have seen. I have not seen the video everybody's talking about. And so just because someone is on the other side, or just because you don't like someone, you shouldn't just make shit up. Now, I know, or you shouldn't say things unless you know they're true or they're confirmed. That's what I mean by that. So Turtle Boy obviously is always, I could sue him easily. He's regularly making false claims about me, but most notedly about faking cancer. I could easily, it would take a minute for my doctor to write a note that would go into an affidavit proving that I had stage 4 cancer diagnosed in late October of 2018. I'm not really a sue type person. It seems like a pain in the ass, and I'm unlikely to be alive for the end of it. But maybe I will consider doing it in order to try to force him into stopping his frivolous lawsuits. And the reason I say it's frivolous is that he's accusing innocent people all of the time, whether it's Jen McCabe or Colin or anybody else, of the most outrageously false things. So that guy should never be suing anybody for defamation. He is in the defamation business. That's his show. That's what he does every night on the show, is put out things that are false. So I have not, hi Dina, I have not consulted a lawyer on it. So, and I'm not really planning to it. If there's a lawyer out there that wants to consider this, I don't know what his resources are, Turtle Boy. He's claiming he's making like $40,000 a month on YouTube. I doubt it. But, if you're a lawyer, you have to decide how much effort it's worth can you get out of this guy. And obviously, his lawyers are probably, his money is going to get used up for paying his own lawyers to defend himself. So I don't want to sue him. But if that's what it takes to get him to drop his frivolous lawsuits, I will consider it. And, oh, and I see people, Ashley High, saying drunk people can't give consent. I want to say that, seeing the word drunk, there is another channel, I think, called Drunken Turkeys or something like that. And I hear from a lot of people that it's really good. I have not seen it, but it's not, I just don't watch true crime shows. So, but a lot of people have said that he's willing to either come on here or me going there. I forget which one. So and somebody had actually sent me during one of the lives I was doing his email address, but I get sometimes during a live, I'm getting so many messages that I don't even remember who sent it to me. So I'd be happy to talk to him. So if anybody wants to set that up, So Jim says you're wrong about the dog guy. He's absolutely right that a dog bite is all based on behavior. Well, dude, you're showing your stupidity. Well, fuck you, dude. You can argue with somebody more clearly than that, No, I didn't say a dog bite is not due to behavior. Obviously, a dog bite is due to behavior, but you ought to be able to determine whether a dog bit someone without knowing all of the history of the dog, whether he ever met the victim. All right. So that's just crazy. You look at all of the evidence involved, including when she's looking at to compare to other possible things that could have caused the injuries on John's arm. So did she, for example, look inside at an image? I don't mean she had to go to a junkyard and do this, but did somebody bring her a close-up of what it looks like inside the housing of a taillight once that outer plastic piece is removed? Is there anything in there that could have created parallel lines? What about if John's arm is in a defensive, some kind of defensive position? Could that have created those wounds? Could a piece of glass created puncture? Things like that. So I don't think knowing the history of the dog is necessary. Obviously, every piece of information helps, you know. Oh, Amy says that was not Karen. Okay. All right. So correction on the script I showed before that apparently it's not Karen, it was someone else that was in the conversation. So any case. Claire Marie, thank you very much. I appreciate it, Claire. Thank you. So can it simultaneously be true that TB is a total lying asshole, but that he was set up? But it's crazy. Yes, it's possible that that Turtle Boy is a lying asshole, but he loves his children. There's all kinds of things that are possible. But the idea that he was set up and tricked, so they subpoenaed Lindsay just to trick Turtle Boy into going there. There were no state police there. There was no cameras set up. There was nobody documenting it. So it's kind of really out there to look at something like that. It really is. There's no signs that we see in any of this investigation or any of the investigations that we're looking at that the police are that clever. And I don't mean that as an insult. I don't, obviously someone like Lieutenant Tully was very intelligent and very capable. But cleverness is not really their style, I'm sure in a different profession, if you put them in a different profession, if you made them spies or something like that, they're capable of cleverness. I'm not saying they're not, but it's just not how the police mind operates. You're kind of just going in a very methodical way about getting the job done. So I think it's crazy, the idea that Turtle Boy was set up by a subpoena. And really very unnecessary too. Isn't it much more likely that Turtle Boy just can't control himself? He asked his lawyer, Brado, if he could go, and Brado said no. He talked to Karen, and Karen said, don't do it. But he did it anyways. But again, if the police had set it up, wouldn't they be documenting it? And it also doesn't make sense. I mean, if that kind of thing came out, what if Turtle Boy goes there and gets violent with, or does something that ends up hurting one of the children? I don't, 4 kids in the house, or I don't know how many. There were kids in the house. So for the police to be involved in that kind of thing, no, that's just not how they operate. They don't think in that. They don't think in those kind of lines. Maybe they should sometimes, but they're just kind of like, they've got multiple cases going on at the same time, and you're just going from A to B to C to D, going through each case. They're not scheming, that's not what they're doing. I mean, if you, in theory, have high-level detectives that are trying to scheme how to catch a serial killer, but they're not scheming to catch Turtle Boy in the act when he does it to himself anyways. So, no, it's not reasonable to believe that he was set up, in my opinion. Right. As Ashley points out, Turtle Boy himself documented the visit by making a recording. So, yes, Jen, I saw that Turtle Boy is requesting an apology from Jen. So, but I'll leave Jen to address those things, and I haven't talked about it with her since then. So, I don't know. All I can really do is say, drop your lawsuits, Turtle Boy, or I'll consider doing mine. And mine, they won't even have to be any discovery. We've already documented you saying that I'm faking cancer. You say it on your channel all the time. You say it in chat, and you say it on tweets. So, and then proving that I have cancer is extremely easy. So drop your lawsuits, Turtle. Grow up. Come on, man. No, I don't consider that extortion. It's not asking him for money. I'm asking him to just be responsible here. You're in the media. You're saying outrageous things about people on every show. So don't go start suing people. Yeah, so I don't even know if Jen is aware of it. You know, at the end of the day, Turtle Boy is almost certainly going to drop all of these things anyways, because the discovery process is not going to be beneficial to him. And most of these lawsuits don't involve people that are worth suing. They don't have, obviously Jen Coffeneffer would, but, most of the other people, you're not going to get anything out of it. So it's all very frivolous. And I have no respect for the lawyer who did this. Don't know who it is, but, and the funny thing is, Francesca, and good to see you, is that Turtle Boy accusing me of faking cancer, he's too stupid to understand this, but it does more harm to him. It does no real harm to me, because only idiots believe it. But it does a lot of, I know for a fact from communications that people on the other side are sick of it. And it causes them to question why they got involved in this in the first place. Now, maybe it's taken too long for a lot of those people to start questioning things, but they are now. And part of it is because of him doing things like that. Even after I go log into my patient portal and prove that he's full of shit, he still does it. So it really does more damage to his brand, so to speak, than anything else. You're not going to get you're not going to determine causation of the attack with any, because let's just assume hypothetically, Jim, this was a case where this really happened, where John went inside the house and was attacked by a dog, but the witnesses aren't admitting it. So you're not really going to get much information on what the incident was. So you could have any dog is capable of violence. If the circumstances are right. So you could have the most peaceful dog in the world, and the dog is in the house, but a fight breaks out between its owner and another man. We don't know what that dog is going to do. And until you're in that situation, the owner doesn't know. No one really knows. Dogs have a degree of unpredictability to them. So all I'm saying is you want to interview Chloe, go ahead. Have at it, Jim. But you should be able to look scientifically at a variety of physical evidence to make a determination if this could have been caused by an animal. You don't have to interview Chloe. So Amy says that Aiden was manipulated by Karen. Yes, I do agree with that. But it doesn't excuse any of it because he was exploiting everything. He claims to be a journalist, but once he decided to buy into the theory, which he did after 1 or 2 days, he stopped asking questions. Now, there were a lot of things that made no sense. Even if you thought maybe there was a conspiracy, he stopped asking questions. So he's not a journalist. He's a carnival barker that wanted to go out and raise a circus for his own benefit. And so that he wasn't covering this like because he believes Karen's innocent, trying to save an innocent woman. No. He's trying to make up something for himself. And throughout the case, we've seen he utterly lacks the integrity to report anything that doesn't fit the narrative. So, for instance, when the GPS came out in September of 2023 that showed that John's phone never went in the house, he didn't even report it to his audience on his show that night. He didn't even talk about it. In that particular report, it said there were microscopic pieces of taillight found in John's clothing. Now, I think microscopic is probably an ill-chosen word because technically that means invisible to the naked eye. These pieces of plastic were 1/16 of an inch. They were visible to the naked eye. They're just very small, basically like dust. It was like plastic dust. But still, he didn't even report that to his audience. And I predicted on my show, like a few hours before, that he wasn't going to tell his audience that. So at the end of the show, when the questions came in, they asked him, what about the microscopic taillight pieces? And he just went, well, of course, Trooper Proctor, in that high-pitched voice, Trooper Proctor sprinkled it on the clothing. Yeah, so Trooper Proctor walks around with test tubes of tiny pieces of taillight plastic. I mean, he doesn't say it like it's so, well, maybe that happened. He just throws it. This is what Nick does too. He just throws his stuff out there as though it's some kind of fact. Trooper Proctor had John O'Keefe's clothes in the back of his SUV for 6 weeks. And he took it to the laundromat. That's why there's no canine DNA. I mean, this stuff is nuts. And they put it out there as though it's fact. And this is why it's hard to respect his audience. Although I really think that the majority of his audience now is not watching because they agree with him. They're watching because of entertainment. So what have I said that's black and white? So I'm not sure if you're addressing this to me. Can it simultaneously be true that TB is 100% wrong about Karen Read and the allegations against him by certain women are false? Why does it have to be so black and white? Well, first of all, I have never, so you're on my channel, so I don't know if you're talking to me, but I've never repeated those allegations. I've never made them myself. I have never made any allegations using the R word or anything like that. As far as I was concerned, it's a he said, she said, and they have to go to other evidence. He hasn't charged with that yet. He hasn't been indicted for that. So I don't even talk about it. Never have. You guys follow all my shows. You know I never talk about it. So if you're saying that I'm looking this in a black and white way, then you have not been listening to this channel. Because like, as I have said, if I haven't, everyone here, if I haven't pissed you off a little bit at some point, then I'm doing something wrong because I'm covering this like an echo chamber. And I don't. I try to look objectively at every single piece of evidence. And so the only thing that I know Turtle Boy is guilty of is wiretapping. We've all seen the evidence, and witness intimidation. He's charged with those things, and we've seen the evidence. That's it. That's all I charge him with. So that's all I've accused him of. So again, I'm not sure if you're directing that at me or somebody else, but if you're directing it at me, it's very unfair. and just very inaccurate. Like Turtle Boy is saying, in his lawsuits that people have accused him of being a drug addict. I've never said that because I don't know that. I mean, I've heard other people talk about that stuff, but I don't have any evidence of that. I would say that clip of him in the car does seem to show him doing a line, but that doesn't make him a drug addict. And I can't say with certainty that that's what he did. I would say I have as much certainty. I have as much medical certainty as Dr. Russell that clip shows Turtle Boy doing a line. I worked in the bars. I know what it looks like. I've seen enough movies. That's what it looks like. So pretty sure he's saying he blew his nose, but you don't inhale when you blow your nose. So, I mean, but again, that doesn't mean that he's a drug addict. So I don't know. I never talk about that stuff. I talk about the witness intimidation. I talk about the reckless disregard for the truth that is at the center of what he's all about. He always wants his attention. I talk about the smearing of his John's family. Those are the things that I talk about. I never talk about anything with Turtle and his women. All those women, as far as I can tell, they're adults and they made those choices. Doesn't interest me. Colin Forrester, hey man, up in what is soon to be the 51st state. Watching the Turtle is exactly the same as watching Jerry Springer. 90% of the audience just likes watching the train derailment that is his life. I think there's a certain truth to that. I definitely think it's the case now. There's a core group of a couple of dozen people that go along with anything he says, and everybody else is just getting some entertainment feeling. I know many, many people that are watching because they hate him. That seems crazy to me. Like, I wouldn't do that. I don't watch him. But again, I don't really watch anything, but I would not watch somebody I hate. I don't get it, but a lot of people do. So, and I'm not knocking them for that. That's to each your own. Everybody has their own form of entertainment. Like I said, I don't watch these kind of things. I don't really watch any live YouTube channels. Rarely. I can't even think of one off the top of my head. I watch a lot of science stuff. I watch clips from TV shows like Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, movies like The Godfather. I do watch podcasts like Lex Friedman. He has a lot of good guests on. Occasionally Joe Rogan. Those are the kind of things I watch. Matt says I should be watching Dolly. Look, I mean, again, I don't watch anything. So I don't watch these kind of shows. I watched him for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes last year. I did admit I found myself laughing. I think he's funny, but it's not the kind of thing that I would watch. It's not really informative, I guess. So I never called Turtle Boy a pedophile. That's crazy. I never even thought it. I don't even know. I mean, in fact, people have every once in a while tried to reach out to me and say that there was an incident where, I don't know, he was at a Buffalo Bills game and was drunk and said some obnoxious shit in the stands that a 16-year-old girl or something got offended with or something. I honestly don't remember the details of it. But people have asked me, was that an example of him sexually harassing an underage girl? No. It was you're in a crowded stadium. It's just somebody that's obnoxious. So I don't accuse people of things that I don't have any evidence for. So no, I have not. He's got to say this stuff now. Look, anybody who watches this guy, even if you're a longtime Turtle insider, you have to understand the guy's dishonest. I mean, if you don't recognize that, then you're just living in your own matrix and you don't even care about reality. I mean, look, in my life in the bar, there were guys I knew that I liked a lot, but I knew they didn't tell the truth on a lot of that. They were tall tale tellers, or when they got mad, they would make dishonest accusations against people. You just kind of, but you still like them, but you know what they're doing. So to watch this guy and not understand that he has no interest in the truth is kind of unusual to me. Like, you have to be just in denial of reality for something like that. But so again, I got to think that even everybody except the pit bull herself probably understands that this guy has no interest in telling the truth. And Maureen mentioned he's running out of content. And this is what drove a lot of the problems here. Honestly, this is what got him into trouble in a lot of ways. So the witness intimidation stuff was in a lot of ways probably not mostly motivated by any desire to get those witnesses to change their testimony or to not show up in court. Now, he did make comments like that regularly on his channel. So as far as the charges, yes, it's very accurate. But I think that was at the heart of what was driving it is the need for content. And that mob finds it entertaining to be cruel to people. That's very similar to what kids on the schoolyard do. It's a very kind of primal, primitive, monkey ape kind of thing that's inside all of us. And we outgrow it as kids. Most of us do. But that crowd does not outgrow it. They just don't outgrow it. So they got a lot of entertainment pleasure in the mob and Turtle Boy hounding, harassing, and torturing the victims. So Mark says, has anything come up about the chip off extraction? You know, we've heard a lot of different things on it, but I would say nothing is reliable. And the most reliable thing we've heard, and you can also get this from really looking at Karen's reaction and things that she's leaked and stuff like that, things that she's not said, things that her minions have said. I think you could say that it's all still up in the air. And there's still, the only thing we've heard is that for sure, it seems to be that there was a lot of new data in terms of the size of the data that came out. So whether any of that data is useful, we don't know. But in terms of the size of the new data that came out, it was apparently extensive. So they're going to need more time to analyze it. And this is one of the things that we've learned in this case is that when it comes to data, everything is way more complicated than we ever knew. Everything is way more complicated. You know, we would have thought in our ignorance that this stuff was all pretty simple, but turns out it's not. So Matt, that's I want to highlight this because this is Leo, I didn't even address your comment. Now I forget what it was. TB plays to the ugly side of humanity. I am ashamed I ever gave him my time and money. And this is something that you want to see from every single one of us human beings to be able to do this. It takes a big person to be able to look in the mirror and say, you know what, I made a mistake. And I wish I hadn't. And I was wrong. So that's basically what he's doing here. So we're seeing more and more of this from people in that movement. But I think this is something we all should be willing to do at different points in our life. If any time, if you make a mistake, and we all make them, you got to be willing to learn from it and grow from it. And I think that's really important. I got to see if I can find Layla's comments because I clicked it because Layla's a good regular and I didn't even read it. I don't think I'll ever find it now. Shit. Oh, I found it. All right. What do I think about Phelps now that he squashed TB in the third-party culprit defense theory? I don't, like I said, I don't listen to much. So I listened to episode 1, maybe the first 15 minutes of episode 3. And then the last episode, those are the only ones I listened to. I didn't even listen to the episode that I was in. And really the only reason I listened to the last episode is because it had the interview with the juror in it. So I found the interview with the juror to be very interesting. So really, but that's, to me, what I wanted to listen to was new information, and what Phelps was doing was needed, but it's not new information. So it didn't have the same interest to me. As far as the third party culprit defense theory, they're still going to go with it in the trial. So I don't think it's, I mean, I've been squashing that every episode, and Kate's been squashing that, and Karen McCormick, and Boundless Millennial, and others that I'm not thinking of at the moment. So the more the merrier. Everybody, the more people that get in and bring their own voice and their own style. And in the case of Phelps, he's done a lot of other true crimes that he's looked into. So you bring some different experience there. So for him to put his spin and his style on it was appreciated. I don't know what the effect of it was. I don't know. You know, Matt himself had told me that. Yeah, see, I don't know. He had said that in the United States, it's more about podcasts, and in Europe, it's more about YouTube. But I don't know. I think you're also looking at, to influence this case, the numbers that matter are the local numbers. So as much as we want to see people in the rest of the country and the rest of the world, we're interested in their opinion on the case. But the only thing that really matters is the local flavor and the jury, because that's where the jury pool is going to come from. So, Laura, this is a good question, and I didn't hear her comments directly. I did hear about this comment that, so after the Tuesday trial, saying that her defense was going to retool and reshuffle. So I heard about this comment. I didn't hear it directly. Who knows what it means? I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, is she saying that just because Brennan made that information public about the feds, about not the feds, the independent medical examiners, experts in dog bites that were hired by the feds? Is that why she's saying that? But she would have known about this because they've had that federal information. And Lally did not call on those two experts, presumably for a reason. So you got to understand that all right, so let's look at the ARCA guys. The ARCA guys understood that they were hired by the feds. They understood what their boss wanted. Now, I'm not saying he came out and told them this in words, but they understood that the reason the feds were investigating this case is they wanted to show that the state was corrupt, that there was a conspiracy theory here. They were hiring the ARCA guys to show that John was not struck by a vehicle. Now, if they knew that, all the experts hired by the U.S. Attorney's Office understood that same thing. So these dog bite experts would have understood the same thing. So they probably made comments in those reports that were designed to, in some way, please their master, Josh Levy. And so that is probably the reason that Adam Lally did not call on those two experts. Because, for instance, let's say you get an expert that comes in and says, well, I've looked at the injuries and those are not dog bites. However, they couldn't have been caused by a car either. So if they said something like that, that would be a problem for the prosecution and a reason why they wouldn't call on him. And I think, just without knowing what's in it, I suspect that there was probably something like that, just because they knew who they were working for, just like the ARCA guys. So, so Jill just asked the same question. Did I about retool everything? So I don't know. We have, so I guess we'll have to look at the comments in the near future that come out by her minions. So Nick Rocco, Melanie Little. I think that's about it. I don't know if she really uses the Glare or LTL or Young Jelly. I don't know if she uses those people in that way. I think she but Nurse Kim, that could be a minion. So I would say Nurse Kim, Nick Rocco, and Melanie Little. Those are probably her main minions. I'm probably forgetting some, but we'll probably get clues as to where they're going from them. And we did in the first trial. We got a lot of clues all the time. So, but there's just really isn't that many different places you can go here. So it's not like you can bring up some new suspect, right? This case is a fundamental either or. Either Karen did this or evidence was planted, extensively planted. Now, that evidence planting had to involve the troopers. Either they planted it or they looked the other way while someone else did. So whatever theory they come up with or whatever they try to present to a jury, it has to involve implying the belief that it happened, that those troopers were covering up. Now, why would those troopers plant evidence unless they were trying to help people in the house? So they're going to go with basically some version of the same theory. So in terms of changing their strategy, yeah, there may be some slight change. But remember, they don't have to prove their theory, and they don't want to prove that. They don't want to put a theory out that's too specific. Because if they put out a really specific theory about what happened, then it invites the public and it invites the jury to focus on that theory and start trying to poke holes in it. But if you just put vague stuff out there, that keeps the jury and the public asking questions about the state's theory. And so that's what the defense wants. They want them focused. So they put out vague shit during the trial. Maybe maybe John went in the cellar, right? Maybe it was Higgins. Maybe it was Colin. But it has to be some variation of those things. I don't see any rule for difference. So, and anything that might create reasonable doubt is worth trying. So you're going to bring in Dr. Russell, and even if it didn't seem to have an effect on the jury last time, but on the chance that it has an impact on one juror, why not bring her in? So I think they're going to do it. So I think you're going to see, I don't know, I can't really imagine much of a different strategy. I've been on the record since July. I feel, I've said this many times. I feel bad saying it because I've talked to Chris a lot, and I don't want to alarm a father, but I think they're getting pretty tough. They can handle it. I think they're going to still focus on Colin. Not that they won't try to seize on Brian Higgins. They'll play up the angle that he was mad because she stopped texting him or something like that. But there's really it's hard to make a case for Trooper Proctor planting evidence for Brian Higgins. It's hard to make a case for why John would be lured into the house and beat up for Brian Higgins. So I think a lot of this stuff, look, no matter what they do, it's kind of a crazy theory, right? The idea that Colin had some feud with John based on him throwing beer cans on the lawn, it's absurd. There's no evidence of it. It's dishonest. But if you're going to explain why Michael Proctor is going to risk his whole career, his freedom, his family's welfare by planting evidence in a case that he's super likely to be caught, if any image comes out that shows that taillight was intact all day, and all it would take is, Karen's brother was with the vehicle. He works at a dealership. Maybe he takes a picture of it. Maybe he knows to take a picture of that taillight, right? There's no way that Proctor would know that. So for Proctor to pry pieces off that taillight at the Sally Port like 16 hours after the crime. Incredibly risky. Why is he going to do that for Brian Higgins? Now, he's not going to do it for Colin Albert either, but at least you could plausibly make the argument there. You know, Colin had been as a kid, to pool parties at his parents' house. His sister was good friends with Chris Albert's wife and his wife's sister. So at least there was some connection there. There's no connection between Proctor and Brian Higgins. So why is Proctor going to plant evidence? And you can't really have any case here without planting evidence. You can't have any third-party culprit. You can't have a defense without planting evidence. Without planting evidence, all you're left to do is back where what David Yannetti planned to do at the beginning was to show that it was an accident. But they're not doing that. They're trying to go with my client was framed. They have to. It's the only way to get her out of jail is to somehow convince the public of that. And I don't see any major options for a change in defense strategy. And furthermore, you have to think too, when someone says something like that, why did they say that? If they're going to do this big change in strategy, why is Karen going to say that? Now, I know that she is a person who has extreme impulse control, which is common with psychopaths. She has impulse control issues in the court. Again, last week, she yelled out something to Brennan, you're mad or you're bad or something like. We've heard different versions of it. It caused a sidebar. So there's all these disturbances. So this is a client that is a terror for those lawyers. She can't control herself. Nonetheless, I don't believe that she came out and said something like that, just like spilled it. I mean, it's possible she did, but I think more than likely that's something that she put out intentionally. And if she put it out intentionally, she had discussed it with her lawyers. So why would they put it out intentionally? Why would they say something like that? I don't know. At the moment, I'm hard pressed to come up with any speculation on that. So I don't know. But this, we'll figure it out. There's probably some kind of reason, but I don't see any major shift in strategy. Even she's saying that, could she just be trying to see, one of the things that they succeeded in doing in the first trial is making the prosecutor, Adam Lally, waste enormous resources defending all her crazy theories that they put out. And that was valuable, you know? So I wouldn't expect any major change in strategy. That's what they have to do. That's, they have no choice but to go down the path of arguing that evidence was planted, which means they have to say that she was framed. And I don't see any reason for doing that except for arguing that the people in the house were involved. And that's who the state police were protecting. I don't see any way around that. This comment I have to repeat because it's weird. This is how I don't even know what side of the case this person is on. Kevin, you aren't objective. You're a fence sitter. That's what a fucking fence sitter is, you moron. A fence sitter is someone who is objectively looking at all the facts and the evidence until they know. So, Aiden, I'll give you one chance. I saw you comment before. I didn't say anything disrespectful. And I had banned you last time and put you back in. Keep trying to give you a chance to be polite. Just call me by my real name. Not that I really care, but just to show why would I let somebody in there be disrespectful? It's, as Ronald Reagan once said in 1980, I paid for this, Mike, damn it. So the court audio, I'm not even sure what you're talking about. You mean the court audio in your case? If you're talking about that, I didn't listen to it. I don't know. I'm not sure what audio you're talking about. I did not listen to your case today. I asked somebody what was going on with it, and they said it was already over, that they still were waiting to I guess waiting on the search terms. I didn't see, so I don't even know what you're talking about. Court audio of this case, or the restraining order. That's just that is the least of your charges that I have. I don't even talk about those charges. The restraining order with Lindsay, as everybody knows, I don't talk about them. Of all the stuff going on with, in case you're getting here late, I've never accused you of anything related to that. You know I haven't. To me, it's a he said, she said, and I don't know what went on, and I don't really care. Now, if they charge you with something, then I'll talk about it more. But at this point, if you're not charged with it, it doesn't really interest me. Now, the wiretapping we know is a fact, and that is part of the charges. The witness intimidation we know is a fact, and you are charged with that. So those are things I talk about. But as far as the other stuff, I don't really have much interest in it. You're talking about just a restraining order. I mean, so what? I mean, it's such a small part of the case. It's unbelievable. Like, you're facing serious charges. That restraining order is, I guess you got to celebrate what you can, but I just had no interest in it. Well, he says the other stuff is going nowhere. I don't know, but you're not a good source, Aiden, because we all know you're not honest. I'm not trying to be insulting. I'm just stating it as a matter of fact, you're not an honest guy. Now, you don't tell the truth about the Karen Reed case. You don't tell the truth about me trying to lie that I'm faking cancer. So I'm not sure how much I'm going to take in terms of a source on you on that case. So whatever, send it to us. I don't care. I don't have an overwhelming interest in your case. I don't even talk about any of your cases much on this channel. I talk about the Karen Reed case. The extent that I talk about you is what you're doing. You are the enemy of free speech. Now, some of that stuff that you do is not necessarily illegal, but you are the enemy of free speech because everything that you have set to do, and I got texts now from you going back 13 years, 10 years ago. I forget, they're old texts. You surprise. I thought maybe you evolved into this thing where you've learned how to control people by the threat of smearing them in social media. But it turns out you came out of the gate doing that. You were like that as soon as you started blogging. That was always, as soon as you built up an audience and you realized that people were afraid of being smeared in social media, and I have the messages, you were trying to intimidate people into either changing their opinion to stick with you or to being quiet. So you are the biggest enemy in this state to free speech. You exist to try to silence people by a threat of media smear. And I also have copies of the message of your pit bull doing it too. So she can sue me if she wants. I got the messages. I've saved them. Always the threat. I'm going to blog about you. If you don't do what I want, I'm going to blog about you. If you don't stay silent, I'm going to blog about you. Hope you like your picture. But that didn't work on me, did it, Aiden? That didn't work on me, kid. And that's what frustrates you. Jen, I'll go to Jen's question. Try to have it moved. We don't know the truth until the jury is sworn, listen to the evidence, and give the verdict. In any case, I'm not sure which case you're talking about here, but sure, in any case, yeah. So JPD, but there's a role for that, right? There's a role for everybody. You need like a variety. If you go to war, you need a variety of different weapons, right? And so there are people in this that are more attack doggish. I can be like that if I need to be, but it's not really my strength. My strength is to be more analytical and calm and try to see things from everybody's point of view. Look, when I was breaking up bar fights, you know, you could see I'm a little on the skinny side, right? So, I mean, I'm tall, but I'm skinny. So, there's some big dudes that get into bar fights, and you want to use a little bit of a combination of force, but if you're a big part of it is to try to make people understand that you're just doing your job and you're just trying to treat them reasonably and all, you know, that's you use it's going to vary a little bit for each situation depending on how violent they are, how drunk they are, blah blah blah, whether they're regulars or not. But I think there's more value to trying to be analytical, to try to look at every piece of evidence objectively from both sides, if you prefer. Turtle Boy, when he attacked me a year and a half ago, he accused me of both sidesism. A journalist, a journalistic Jesus, he says, accusing somebody else of both sidesism. Any journalist should be both sides. Now, I don't mean both sides forever. Like there are certain cases where once the evidence is built up, that it's overwhelming and you take a position. But that was not the case in the Karen Reed case. It never made sense, the idea that these people were going to plan to put the victim out alive on their own lawn. That's crazy. And I will venture Turtle Boy understood that that was crazy, but the only reason he was duped was because Karen managed to convince him that the feds were about to come in and blow this all wide open. He now knows that's not true. He now knows she lied to him on that, but he can't get out of it. And even in his own mind, he's just through cognitive dissonance, he's convincing himself, McAlberts. It's crazy. But it never made sense to not be approaching this case from a both sides position. That just doesn't make sense. There's just too many weird things in this case. Too many things that you put out, told by Karen, as odd things, we now know are not odd things. It was not odd, for instance, that the Lexus was towed to the Sally Port. The Sally Port was a mile away from the prosecution's office, the DA's office. You always want the evidence near the prosecutors. So there was never, even if this happened in July, that's where they would have towed it. All right. You guys try to make a big deal about the fact that the evidence, like John's clothing, wasn't logged into the state police system until 6 weeks after John's death. But you don't try to understand anything. That's the difference between us. It may take a long time, but you try to understand things. Did it really seem likely that Trooper Proctor had John's clothes in the back of his SUV for 6 weeks? You guys thought that. You didn't question it. And they even Jackson and Yannetti, they knew better, but they tried to imply it in the trial. And Nick just tells us on court TV as though it's a fact. But now we know the truth, okay? Because we know how the system works. If your goal is understanding, you understand that the evidence is brought to the DA's office where the prosecutors are going to have access to it. That's the primary storage location. And we learned from trial, it's called unsurprisingly, the evidence room. So it's the evidence room at the district attorney's office. That's where the clothing was brought. But a lot of evidence eventually has to be tested out to a lab for testing. And just as there's no Sally Port at the district attorney's office, there's no lab. So labs are a specialized thing. So 6 weeks after John's death, that clothing was sent out to a state police lab in order to be tested. That is when it was logged into the state police evidence system. Before that, it was in the evidence room at the district attorney's office. It was not in Michael Proctor's car. But you don't tell your audience this, okay? I'm going to put this up here, your last comment, and then we'll just ban you because it just shows you how shallow you are. Once again, I'm kicking your ass. Yeah, I am, brother. I'm kicking your ass in the world of arguments. And this is how you demonstrate that you know it, that you're losing. He says, Kevin, I'm going to have more paying viewers tonight than you're going to have for free on here. Sucks to suck. So you lose the argument. So you try to go to that. I know you didn't have a different normal childhood because you were a little nerd. But when you're, as normal kids will tell you, when you're playing sports or you're getting into fights on the playground or on the street corner, get into a heated argument, when you go to that, that's a way of saying you lost. It's kind of like your mama wears army boots. I'm pursuing the truth. You're pursuing a crazy conspiracy theory. There's a public thirst for conspiracy theory. Look, even you're smart enough to understand that once somebody realizes that this is just a hit and run, they have no interest in it anymore. But if you think that this is a conspiracy, you're all riled up and you're going to keep watching every show on it. So that's the nature of the beast. So once I convince somebody that this is just a hit and run, there's a very good chance that they're not going to watch anymore. But you guys know you have to destroy me because I'm winning. Now, it's not for me. I don't matter. What matters is justice for John, justice for Karen, and justice for the people that are being falsely accused by this irrational witch hunt mob that you're proud for having stirred up. So kind of love these posts because they just show you're losing. All right, so we bounced some guys, so he won't be a distraction. I'll probably take him off the list down the road. I tend to like to bring him back in once in a while, but I mean, it's just it's so obvious that he's losing. I mean, anybody watching this coming in who didn't know, who hadn't seen this channel before or knew nothing about Turtle Boy or the Karen Reed case, you look at this and you can see, yeah, this guy's losing. I don't want to say it's fun to be on the winning side because I feel bad, again, for the O'Keefe family and for the witnesses. But considering what I personally have gone through over the last year and a half, yeah, it's kind of fun to be on the winning side. And you can see it. These guys are losing left and right. They don't have arguments that can deal with me. They're not after the truth. And people can see this. So I just explained, as I have before, why that clothing was logged in to the state police evidence system 6 weeks later. Have they ever explained it to their audience? If you're happen to be watching right now and you are a fan of Turtle Boy, let me just ask you right out. Has he ever explained to you why that clothing was logged into the state police evidence system 6 weeks later? I just explained it to you. Now, it was explained in trial. All right, but not everybody had time to watch all the trials, so I understand that. But one of us wants to give their audience the truth, whatever it is and wherever it goes. The other one is Turtle Boy. The other one is LTL. The other one is Young Jelly. The other one is Melanie Little. Is Melanie Little still saying that John's shoe is missing, his belt is missing, his hat is missing? These people, when they get the truth and they learn they've made mistakes, they don't correct it. They don't want their audience to know the truth. So anybody watching Turtle Boy isn't really interested in the truth. They're not watching it for that. They're either watching it for the entertainment or they're brainwashed. I don't know. But I don't think there's too many brainwashed people left. James Hamlet says, how come they almost got a conviction? Exactly. So despite a pretty weak prosecution, they got 9 jurors. And none of the jurors have come forward to say that they believe Karen was killed inside the house. Nobody. Even the juror that Turtle Boy interviewed, that was, and I found that interview to be very interesting. but he interviewed I think it was a female juror that voted not guilty on all three. But she didn't say, I don't know, Victoria, I didn't time you out. Victoria, unless I accidentally, I didn't time anybody out. I bounced Turtle. I think that's the only one I bounced. So, but it's tricky. You go to like press on something to do it and it moves. So, but if this is Victoria in Dublin, you know, you're a good friend of mine, and I'm sorry if we did something. I apologize. Accidents happen. So, but we love you, Victoria. You know that. Baghdad Bob. Exactly. I've used that same expression before. I mean, he's just spinning bullshit at this point. Not even good bullshit. Like he knows I have the explanations for things. He doesn't want his audience to hear him. You lost again, Turtle Boy. But he'll say he won because it's all about duping. So he's got more paid members. But yet he's got more paid members, and he says I don't matter, but he's always in here. He's always in here, right? So obviously I do matter. So I guess we can't ask Tom Fleming if he's having ice cream tonight. He isn't here, unless you guys have seen him that I haven't. He's on vacation. He says he's got a members only show tonight. So it's kind of late. So I don't know. Now you just can't leave. He makes it impossible to leave. I don't know about that. No, I'm never in his chat. But it's just, I don't watch his show. Like I said, to be in fairness to him, I don't watch anybody's, but I mean, I stopped watching his in May of 2023 when he was going after the witnesses, but it was a process, Oh, it's Victoria Vento, not Victoria from Dublin. Okay. I have to go back. It's been a while since I saw, going back, like say a year and a half, yeah, a little more than a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I had respectful conversations with Victoria on Facebook. Quite a few of them. And it's possible to have civil discussions with people you disagree with. But then if I remember right, she did start to cross the line, but I don't remember. Now, because I'm not sure, I'm not going to say, but I do believe that there was something she did. A lot of these people, another one was Semolina. I was respectful to her, and there she was spreading shit about me behind my back. So that false stuff. So yes, I didn't lie. It was a mistake, and I already corrected it. So the conversation was with Amy. So Victoria, if this is Victoria, I'll correct it again. The piece that I showed before of a dialogue was not between Karen. I've already corrected it. I'll correct it as many times as I need to. I misunderstood it. So I made a mistake. I misunderstood it, and I'm correcting it. So. I did correct myself, Victoria, but I'll correct it as many times as I need. But one thing that is clear is that you were going to his private house. Okay? So do you want to talk about that? Why were you going to the private house? Okay, Victoria, then you tell me. Why were you going to his house? Why were you going to his house? Let's turn the questions on you. All right. Everybody makes mistakes, especially with live stuff. Somebody sends you something, Miss Victoria. It wasn't like I was sending some, but certainly it's true that you were going to his house, right? That part is true. And that's the part that we should want to know. You live and work on the Cape, but that's not a reason to be going to his house. Were you taking pictures? You drive by his house. You said in that message that he lives in a cul-de-sac. So you drive down that cul-de-sac 4 days a week? That's kind of weird, Victoria. Are you stalking him? Do you have a crush? We should let him know. Maybe you got a crush. Higgins has a girlfriend, so we're not going to try to set you up. But if you got a crush, we'll let him know. Brian Higgins' house. Yes, Brian Higgins. Yeah. Yeah, a bunch of owls. Exactly. Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to avoid saying people's names sometimes. That's all. But so since you go by his house 4 times a week, what time do you go by? So we can get a message to him so he can watch for you. What time you going by his house? Have you stopped this stalking or do you still going by? Victoria gone? Come on, Victoria. Why are you going by the house? Are there any other witnesses' houses that you're going by? We need to know this, right? How many witnesses do you drive by their house? How many witnesses? Why? What are you trying to do? You can practically see his house. No, you said in the message you drove down the cul-de-sac. So you drove down the cul-de-sac. You went out of your way to drive by his house. Are you going to deny that? Are you going to say that you didn't go out of your way to drive in front of the house? Come on, Victoria. You may not hold up under questioning. All right, so I'm going to pretty much have to say goodnight. 2 hours and 20 minutes means I will have a hard time walking. You go by his street all the time. It wasn't out of your way. If you don't drive by his house on his way somewhere, then it was out of your way. Now, you might be able to say it wasn't much out of your way, but it was out of your way. It's a cul-de-sac, which I believe would be technically a dead end. So you went down a dead end street just to see his house. All right. That is technically going out of your way. It may have only been a couple minutes out of your way or 10 minutes out of your way. I don't know. But you went out of your way to go by a witness's house. Did you take pictures? That's what I want to know. Did you take pictures? You reported what kind of vehicle was outside. Did you take pictures of his license plate? These are important questions because this is a decorated federal officer who does the kind of work that stuff needs to be documented. Are you taking pictures of his vehicle? Did you take any pictures of his vehicle? Did you get any pictures of his license? No, I'm not lying. You just said you went down a cul-de-sac. That is out of your way. Are you too dumb to understand what a cul-de-sac is? All right. If it's not on the way, if you weren't going to a house on the street, you went out of your way. And that, I just remembered that was the thing about you. I don't think I banned you for that, but yeah, you weren't very smart. I do remember that now. I was, it was difficult having those conversations because, whew, wow. All right. Does anybody have any more questions? Thanks, Dina. Appreciate it. Pale Yellow. Higgins definitely has cameras because of his job. A lot of cameras. So nobody should be going anywhere near that property unless they belong there. That's right. He's a veteran. He's a decorated federal officer. Used to be a lieutenant in the Cambridge Fire Department. And he's guilty of no crime here. So what have you done with your life? This is a lot of what goes on here. It's envy. It's people who have done essentially nothing of note with their life. So they want to attack other people. That's what they do. So now her best argument is, Kevin, you know Karen is innocent and everything you say is a lie. This is what I say. She wasn't very smart. And so apparently nothing has improved in the last year and a half. She knows I don't lie. And the 9 jurors, Victoria, voted guilty. All right. And I was frustrated with that because that was what I expected, frankly. But the evidence that came out in trial was enough for her to get convicted. It just wasn't presented well. That's unfortunate. That's not going to happen this time. That's not going to happen this time. No stone is going to be left unturned. He's going to build on what Adam Lally did, bring his own talents, which were on display this week, and they're going to not spare the expense this time. They're going to bring in independent experts to do what is needed to explain to a jury and convince a jury what happened. But the evidence is already there. People like Victoria kind of typify those ones that can't really understand it. You try to explain to them that the GPS shows with a degree of accuracy that's you can calculate it every second that John's phone never went in the house, but they give you what I've called the free Karen Reed look. Nothing comes out, We've already talked about Higgins shooting. I went over the article. He's gotten awards for that. Saved the life of his partner. Dr. Kenneth Kinsey testified in the Murdaugh trial. That's right, because maybe because of I don't know what happened, what he testified to, but the murders took place in the dog kennels, right? So. You guys ever notice that a lot of the free Karen Reed men seem to make, and this is not, please don't misinterpret this, but they seem to make some, I don't want to say it. I'm not going to say it. Never mind. I'm not going to say it. But they make comments that you got to kind of wonder about what kind of, again, I can't say it. My coffee with cream. That's it. There's no booze in it. If that's what you're trying to imply, there's no fentanyl in my coffee. It's a little bit of cream. Actually, you know what? I will tell you this. I gave up sugar in my coffee a long, long time ago. And about a year ago, I replaced that with something that you guys will probably think is odd, but honey. I put a little bit of honey in it. Thank you, Carrie. So no, I just, it's coffee with cream and honey in it. That's it. Coffee will keep me up till about midnight. So yeah, I'm not usually drinking it this late like this, but it's a weird mix. I think I'm the only one I've ever heard of doing it. So the dude abides puts Kahlua naturally because the dude drinks White Russians. See, I bet you didn't think I knew that, dude. But I've seen the movie many times. Bailey's in coffee. Yeah, I mean, I've done all those things in coffee, like at work. But to me, the thing about drinking was it was always a. I didn't see what question you asked, Victoria. I'll look for it, but I'm getting kind of bored with you. So, drinking for me was an activity. I didn't do it at home. I didn't do it alone. I just did it when I went out. I don't like to drink with dinner either. It makes me tired. So I just now for 20 years I was out every night just about. So, but I didn't start drinking. I didn't go out till like 10, 11 o'clock. So, you know. Thank you, Rose. Appreciate it. You must be drinking something harder than me, though. I didn't see what question she asked. If it was a question about the case, you have to understand there is no question that I haven't been asked many times in this case. I mean, do you really think that at this point in the game, there's no question? Not just me, Kate, Carrie Lama. I mean, so many people. We've seen all of the questions. There's nothing new. There are no new questions. There's nothing we haven't considered. So it's not like you're going to ask some question that I'm ignoring or I'm afraid of. I've seen every question. I've answered every question at one time. You may not be satisfied with the answer. That's always going to be whatever. I mean, so for instance, butt dials, right? I can give you an attempted explanation, but who really knows? Because it's something that happened with people that were asleep or half asleep and been drinking for a while. And it's just not something that I can only say that butt dials is like for people my generation that remember older cell phones, like from the 90s and the 2000s. A butt dial was just something that actually happened in your pocket where you accidentally called someone. But so now it picked up the name butt dials. So I do several butt dials a week. I call them butt dials, but it's not in my pocket. It's actually usually in my hand, and I accidentally hit the wrong thing. Sometimes it's in my pocket. If I open it up and it's on my recent call screen, it could happen that way. But more often than not, with me, it happens actually in my hand where I accidentally dial the wrong number. But all a butt dial means is an accidental call. The dude abides butt dialed 911 twice. How do you do that? Hans, you mean cold brew beer or cold brew coffee? Oh, you'll never look at coffee the same again. I never. The only time I had cold brew coffee was at Dunkin' Donuts. I wouldn't say that I cared for it, but maybe I didn't drink it right. Maybe I didn't make it right. I don't even know. They accidentally gave it to me. It was an accident. So I don't know. I do love my coffee though. I would have no problem giving up booze. I very seldom drink anymore anyways. If I buy a 6-pack, it lasts 6 months, you know. But I do still like to drink. I just get hangovers, so I don't really do it. But it was not I drank hard in part of my life for many, many years. Because I owned a bar and I had to be in the bar. But so even I worried when I left that industry, was I going to have withdrawals or something like that? But I didn't. I don't really have an addictive personality, and I didn't develop an addiction to alcohol. But I am addicted to coffee. It's not that I guess I'm addicted to it. I just I would feel like I'm not fully awake if I was not able to drink any coffee during the day. So Ken says the defense looks for a coincidence that's not irrelevant. Yeah, that's the job of the defense, is to find odd things. Well, first of all, a lot of it is to find things that actually are not odd and make them odd. So, for example, the Sally report, nothing odd about that. John's clothing, where it went, the evidence room, and then eventually into the state police lab, nothing odd about that. Allie McCabe's phone, trying to find a signal. They tried to make that seem like it was something, but there was nothing that she was even aware of or doing. So it's crazy. And even Jen McCabe's deletions. It came out that there were no deletions. It was established in trial, and it was explained why a folder is basically starting a new folder because it's full. So it's going to delete things in the old folder, things like that. So, I mean, but it is their job to do that. I get it. But it's our job in the public to understand that that's their job to do that and develop. So we have to develop a sense of skepticism and realize that that's their job, is to make ordinary things look odd, look mysterious. Our job is to understand that. Now, in some cases, odd things are very meaningful. And like when you start out looking at a case like this, you should be looking at the odd things, and you should try to understand them, and you should try to look at all the totality of evidence and determine only once you've seen all of the fundamental evidence, whether those odd things are meaningful or not. So I always use the example of OJ's glove. Now, he did have on a latex glove underneath it. Maybe that's why. I don't know. There's an explanation for why it didn't fit, but the point is, that's a highly visible example. But there's odd things in every case that have to be. There's always a certain amount of odd things that are never explained, and that's just the way it is. Now, sometimes those odd things are very meaningful. If the prosecution in a particular case doesn't make a compelling case on their own, then those odd things start to grow into something important. They might be evidence of that the prosecution is wrong. There are plenty of cases where the prosecution gets it wrong, especially where they police develop tunnel vision. This is not a tunnel vision case, though, because this is a case where they're accused of planting evidence, which is different than tunnel vision. Jay, you say there's nothing wrong with sitting out in front of Higgins' house, but then why does she want to deny it? All right. So she's saying she did not go out of her way, that she was just on her way through. So what's the truth here? So now Victoria is now saying, oh, it's a public street, so it's okay. So you're admitting now that you did go out of your way. So you're changing your statement. You're changing your statement. And what we want to know is, did you take pictures? Did you take pictures of his vehicle? Did you take pictures of any other vehicles that were there? I mean, look, we're in a case here where, Kerry, how many people were on the rolling rally? I forget the estimate. It was over 100, I think, right? How many people went on the rolling rally in the summer of 2023? Let me know if you have a number on that, because I don't remember. It was in the report. And but we know, and this was documented, that there were a couple of women who are nurses who were in that rolling rally, who at every stop, as Turtle Boy get out and scream things in a bullhorn, accusing innocent people of being murders and causing a disturbance. There were a couple of nurses that at each stop got out of the car and spit in the driveways. Amazing. So this is why guys have created this kind of a crazy, deranged mob. This is the problem. So you're going around bothering innocent people. You know? Thank you, dude. I think it is time for that. Kerry, did I miss? Did you have the number? How many people were at that rolling rally? I know it was like dozens of cars, and we saw the pictures. Some of the pictures in the prosecution document that came out last January, because they knew the rolling rally was coming, so they set up cameras to document it. But about 100, okay. I thought it was a little more than 100, but yeah, so about 100. Okay. But 100 people, imagine 100 people and dozens of cars going down your street and pulling up in front of your house and spitting in your driveway, and some little dude getting out with a bullhorn and calling you a murderer and shouting at the neighbors saying, "Do you know you live next to a murderer?" Is this your idea of justice? Is this your idea of fairness? Victoria, is that your idea of justice? Look, the evidence here is overwhelming, Victoria. So let's finish with this. We're going to give Victoria a roadmap to bulletproof evidence. Okay, first of all, this case, as I said, is an either or. Either Karen did it or that those taillight pieces were planted. There was no opportunity to pry those pieces off and bury them at the snow. They were found at ground level, 3 feet down, underneath the old snowbank the Lucky law firm had made at 5:30. There was no time to do that, Victoria. When were they planted? All right. The Lexus arrived within the Sallyport at 5:36. At that time, the 7-man CERT team was already setting up and had been setting up for a half hour, more than a half hour. And they were just waiting for the 7th man to arrive, but they were already starting to shovel snow. This area they were searching was the size of 2 parking spaces. The Sallyport door closed at 5:41. It's a 5-minute drive to the crime scene from the Sallyport. The main taillight piece was found at 5:45. And again, that area that they were digging in, 7 guys, shoulder to shoulder, was the size of 2 parking spaces. That piece was found at ground level, 3 feet down. All right. So if you believe that was planted, I don't get it. I don't get it. Unless all of those 7 men on the CERT team, they're in on it too, right? So unless they're in on it too, okay, you say there's no evidence of anything being found at 5:45, but there is evidence. Now, you don't have to accept it, but Lieutenant O'Hara, the head of the CERT team, testified in detail that that's what time it was found. Okay, so now, again, to believe that that evidence was planted, you have to believe that not only was Michael Proctor in on it and Buchanan, but you have to believe that Lieutenant O'Hara, the head of the CERT team, was in on it. You have to believe that the other 6 members of the CERT team were in on it. And you have to believe that Lieutenant Tully, who was there supervising, was in on it. So that is 10 troopers that you have to believe were planting evidence to frame Karen Reed. Why? It's crazy. It's crazy. But when was the other opportunity that they could have planted that evidence or could have had access to the vehicle? And of course, the images are fairly clear. Unfortunately, there's never anything to be movie clear, but the images are fairly clear that the taillight was broken at 5:08. If you look at the corner shot of it, you can see that it's missing pieces exactly where it was found to be. It was missing pieces at 8:22 when the Canton police officer went there on a wellness check. And it's visibly missing those red pieces when it's moved on to the tow truck because you can see it flashed a little white light, which would be red if it was working. You also have the testimony of Jen and Kerry. Now, if you don't want to believe Jen because you believe she's Hannibal Lecter, okay. But Kerry Roberts is a friend of the O'Keefes. She wasn't connected to the other people. She's connected to the O'Keefes. And her testimony was very clear, describing, she was shown an image of the taillight taken in the Sally Port, and she says, yes, that's what I saw. So the evidence that it was missing all those pieces early on in the day is overwhelming. And in addition, now we didn't see this, but you may see it at this trial. For whatever reason, they chose not to use it. But Karen Reed herself told Gretchen Voss in a recorded interview with all 3 of her lawyers present, she described showing that taillight to Kerry and Jen in the driveway, John's driveway. And she said it was, I don't have the exact quote here, but that it's missing pieces. And there was wires exposed and things exposed on it to the point where she was worried about the functioning of her vehicle. And she plucked a piece out and dropped it in the driveway. Now that would have been what, 5:45 in the morning. So Karen herself will tell you that taillight was missing pieces. Now, why would she say that? Because at the time she said it, she didn't understand and her lawyers didn't understand what I understood. Sorry if that sounds egotistical. It's a fact. I remember telling Sean on the phone after we first saw that video of on Court TV of Karen backing up in the driveway video. And I told Sean, I said, what we need is an image of the taillight, clear image, as early as possible in the day. And if it's already missing pieces, there's almost no chance that there could be a conspiracy. If it's intact, however, there is a conspiracy. But they hadn't thought it through that way. So the reason Karen told the Gretchen Voss that it was missing pieces was because the point of her story was the state police had searched John's driveway days later, and they did not find the missing piece that she dropped there, or she claims to have dropped there. So she was telling this story as a way of saying the state police are lying. And this is why in the trial, Adam Lally, it didn't come up, but he made a point as part of his preparing this. He showed a lot of video of that driveway first being shoveled and then being snowblown. And you're probably thinking at the time, why is he showing this? And it never came to fruition. But that's the reason he was showing it. Because if the defense ever tried to claim, how could you have searched the driveway? Where was the missing piece that Karen dropped there? Well, the snowblower obviously blew it somewhere and they just didn't find it. It's probably still there in the yard now. But Karen herself told that story. Now, that's why she told it back then. So there's no question that all of those pieces were missing at the time. But we can go further. The logic of the case makes no sense. The logic of the conspiracy theory makes absolutely no sense. I'm not even going to run down that because we can go to the vehicle data, which I've shown many times, and I'd be happy to send it to you, Victoria. But the vehicle data shows that Karen made a 3-point turn on Cedar Crest sometime around 12:24. And 8 minutes and 4 seconds after that is when she put it in reverse at high speed. And that triggered the creation of an event in the vehicle data. 4 seconds into that event is when you see the telltale signs of a pedestrian strike. So 8 minutes and 8 seconds after Karen made the 3-point turn on Cedar Crest, that's when she struck John. Now, since that 3-point turn was about 12:24, plus or minus, say 4 or 5 seconds, that means that 8 minutes and 8 seconds, 8 minutes and 8 seconds after that is when she struck John. So somewhere around 12:32:08 to 12:32:12, 12:32:13, somewhere in that range. Well, John's phone last moved at 12:32:16. So just a few seconds before John's phone moved for the last time, the vehicle data shows that Karen struck an object. Dude, there's no reason for any sane person to believe in this conspiracy theory anymore. There's just too much evidence. So there's obviously more. There's John's hair, John's DNA found on the taillight piece. There's a lot of stuff, but there's just enough there that it's not rational. You're believing in this because you want to believe it. It's like a new religion for you, and you don't want it to be challenged. You don't want new information. This is the same thing with Turtle Boy. He doesn't want new. Now, Turtle Boy doesn't believe it for the same reason you do. You believe it because it's your new religion. Turtle Boy believes it because it's his empire. This was his key to becoming a big shot. But he couldn't really control himself. He has no more impulse control than that Karen does. So he did a lot of asshole things that made him untouchable as a mainstream person. So, all right, guys. Oh, I'm going to pay a price for this and hip and back pain. So, thank you guys. I appreciate you being here. And Victoria, I'm sorry if I sounded mean, but again, let's finish again correcting. Victoria had that conversation not with Karen, but with Amy. Victoria seems to be admitting now that she did go out of her way to go by Brian Higgins' house. We don't know if she took any photos. She's probably not going to tell us. So, and I don't blame her for that. If she took some photos of Higgins' vehicle, I don't know if that's a crime, because Brian is a federal officer. Maybe it's not. I don't know if there's any special laws for that, but any laws for that. But it's certainly wrong, and that's why she doesn't want to admit it. So if she did it, again, I'm not saying that you took any pictures. No, I'm not lying. You admitted to going out of your way. You drove down a cul-de-sac to go by his house. You admitted it. So there's no lie there. No one said it was illegal to drive by his house. You're the one that lied then by saying you didn't go out of your way. All right. So we didn't say you broke a law. We just said what you did was creepy. You said you didn't do it. And now you're admitting you did it. So